USS Donald J. Trump Aircraft Carrier Chapter 9. Dream Sequence 2 Delta at Seoul, South Korea, Episode 1, October 23, 2021. Donald J. Trump was docked in the Pacific Ocean somewhere near the Korean Peninsula. Thus far, our group of survivors were being confined and holding cells somewhere on one of the lower levels of the battleship, waiting to be court-martialed on the charge of dereliction of duty in a time of international military conflict. Bunker Zulu's bigwigs had reported that road groups of international dignitaries, local nationals, and armed service members had gone off on a tangent. They contradicted our claims about the Wipe 'Em Clean campaign, saying that no such campaign existed and that there were no such creatures as afflicted things, or mutarid bulldogs, or any of the other creatures we survivors had reported. According to the bigwig civilian politicians and high-ranking military officers stationed at Bunker Zulu, everything that had come from our mouths was a fabrication. They claimed that we were trying to save our own asses by telling paranoid and repulsive tales. They claimed that Bunker Charlie didn't exist either. I was sitting in the interview room with a group of 12 paralegals, medical doctors, military prosecutors, local national experts, and a host of others whose purpose was to keep us away from other people so as to uphold Bunker Zulu's politically correct facade. The female United States Attorney 93, who led you and the others away from Bunker Zulu. Each of us had our prisoner number ironed onto the orange jumpsuit we were wearing. My number was 93. That question has been asked and answered hundreds of times already, I reminded them. Things of that nature occurred for the first 3 months. Next, they moved us to medical units for further evaluation, where our orange jumpsuits were replaced with hospital scrubs. We were no longer considered suspicious but mentally unhealthy in the early stages of psychosis. All our freedoms had been restored, but we weren't authorized to leave the medical unit without permission. Besides us survivors of the Wipe 'Em Clean campaign, there was a host of other injured civilian dignitaries, local nationals, and troopers needing medical care residing on these units as well. The 1 square mile medical facility was filled to overcapacity with people exhibiting injuries of all types. Attired in our assigned scrubs, Jamie, I, and several others wandered around the unit's next 2 hours. One of the first we visited was a burn unit, Unit 1 Alpha, which housed patients with burns that have been dubbed as the least severe. Its 300 beds were occupied with people suffering from chemoradiation burns. Patients in this unit required less attention from the medical professionals. A handful of pre-nursing majors from the community college were in charge of its daily operation. We walked through the maze of occupied beds. Occupants were either sleeping or sitting upright and writing letters or reading magazines. I knew no one on Unit 1 Alpha. Jamie ran into several classmates of hers from West Point. Others met people they knew from somewhere else, all of them chatting and laughing about past events, crying both tears of joy and tears of misery. The vast majority of the occupants of this unit knew of others who had been less fortunate than THCY. They cried tears of sorrow for them, also crying tears of exultation for how they had performed heroic feats and had survived. We moved next to Unit 1 Bravo, which housed those with what were considered to be mild burns. The 600-bed unit was occupied to overflowing. The oversight of certified medical professionals was deemed vital. The vast majority of the unit's occupants were asleep, having BCEN sedated. Those who were awake wandered around like zombies. Facial burns had made these people, who used to look like models, look like them kid. Their spouses didn't recognize them anymore. The burn victims themselves didn't recognize their own faces. What was left unburned, that is in a mirror. Contributing to their grotesque appearance were their hairless heads and the massive burn scars from when they had been exposed to the radiation. Jamie, H.K. Guy, the defrocked priest, the tall Nigerian woman, and a handful of others all ran into someone they knew from somewhere and were conversing. They laughed weakly and cried endlessly. We were at the midpoint of the 600-bed dormitory bay. The Nigerian woman rushed over and spoke with a strong accent. The bad American is fighting with some nuns, she told us. She led us over there. When we were within several feet, we heard loud shouting coming from the defrocked priest and some of the nuns. There were 9 tall nuns from Ireland and Germany, clothed in white linen, standing with their hands on their hips and staring down at the defrocked priest with contempt. Lieutenant Colonel Rumvong asked, "What's going on? Why so much noise? Patients need a quiet place to heal." The Nigerian woman said, "Bad American, shut your mouth." The defrocked priest groaned. He said angrily, "I don't like these nuns. They lack no etiquette. We don't like this man. He's bad, an Irish nun shouted. Nearby, patients rubbernecked in our direction. Some encouraged a fist fit, others yelled at everyone to be quiet. Several medical doctors and nurses came over and ordered us out. HK Guy and several others grabbed the defrocked priest's forearms and dragged him along. This is not over. Not even close, the defrocked priest assured the group of German nuns. Good riddance, one of the nuns said. They waved goodbye to the defrocked priest. Back in our medical unit, lunch was served. Once we had received our daily rations, we sat down at this nettermost table. I, the defrocked priest, HK Guy, Jamie, and a host of others were sitting at the table, most of us on days 4 through 6. There were a handful from the group with Lieutenant Colonel Rumvong, day 1. Half of day 1 had elapsed. Thus far, a host of medical experts and psychiatrists have introduced themselves and given us a preview of what to expect of day 2 and day 3, discussing the type of examinations and making recommendations. The unit was classified as a pre-release unit, PRU. With 1,000 beds, it was still overcrowded with a mile-long waiting list. The PRU's core function was to perform a medical evaluation on all patients prior to releasing them back to duty. The maximum stay was 6 days. Days 1 to 3 were set aside for medical evaluations from doctors of all specialties. On day 4 were the physical evaluations. Day 5 dealt with ID and uniform issues, and on day 6, patients were to report back to their assigned units. The dining hall was filled with people having quiet conversations about Armageddon, the day of reckoning, the end of the world, a post-nuclear apocalypse, and a zombie apocalypse. Whichever name one chose for it, it all meant a slow and prolonged death. Once we had sat down, the others side-eyed us with contempt. They had obviously bought into the bigoted nonsense of that Bunker Zulu bigwigs, asserting that we were survivors of the Wipe 'Em Clean campaign who had discred. With no rank or name affixed to our assigned hospital scrubs, the patients had no military or civilian rank. Military and dignitary etiquette had gone out the window. A tall male patient with the number 211 affixed to his scrubs groaned at the sight of us. His messy hair and unshaven face demonstrated his laziness and his lack of concern for his appearance. Those nearby stared at us contemptuously, too. Patient 211 spoke slowly through clenched teeth. "How was your holiday?" An Asian woman, patient 432, slim and petite with short curly black hair and a scar on the left side of her face, obviously a knife wound, helped out 211. She said, "Deserters like you should be hanged." The defrocked priest, or patient 876, could no longer stomach the horseshit. He yelled at patient 432, "Rice farmer, you listen to me. We risked our lives to save this shittle Asian continent from complete obliteration. On your knees to beg for forgiveness." Patient 432's face reddened and filled with anger. She stood up, reached over, grabbed the defrocked priest by the neck, and yanked him across the table. Patient 876 struggled with his arms swinging and his legs kicking in every which direction. Patient 432 elbowed the defrocked priest's left eye. HK Guy and O'Brien pulled patient 876 away from patient 432. The petite Asian woman screamed, "You're as bad as your President Donald Trump." The defrocked priest, once he'd regained his composure, retorted boisterously, "Female communist." HK Guy shoved a handful of napkins into the defrocked priest's mouth, and O'Brien pressed him down so that he couldn't move. Both stared at each other with contempt and groaned. A few minutes later, once tempers had cooled a degree or so, both began eating, but they side-eyed each other. Jamie stared at patient 211 and rebutted his comment, saying, "You and any others who believe Bunker Zulu's bigoted nonsense are in for a rude awakening." A tall Canadian woman, patient 912, groaned at Jamie. She stood up and pressed the middle finger of her right hand against Jamie's nose, yelling, "Liar! You lie like your President Donald Trump." You and others like you went elsewhere to avoid 876, struggled with his arms swinging and his legs kicking in every which direction. Patient 432 elbowed the defrocked priest's left eye. HK Guy and O'Brien pulled patient 876 away from patient 432. The petite Asian woman screamed, "You're as bad as your President Donald Trump." The defrocked priest, once he'd regained his composure, retorted boisterously, "Female communist." HK Guy